I knew something was shifting when the IT guy, Ben, the one who always pretended he didn't see the post-it wall I kept meticulously alphabetized, came in and quietly snapped a photo of my filing cabinet setup like it was an ancient ruin. No explanation. No request. Just a dry little smirk, and out the door he went, mumbling something about legacy mapping. That's when I checked the internal org tracker and saw a new calendar entry had popped up in my feed. Transition Sync W Auditor CFO Carlisle Records Modernization Initiative. I've been here for 16 years. Every certification, every audit, every blood pressure spiking federal review, I've had a hand in steering us through without a single corrective action. Not one. My system isn't flashy, it's not digital first, but it's complete. Every checklist, every approval, every deviation note. Signed, sealed, paper-backed, and indexed twice. Once by topic, once by year. I don't need applause for it. I need it to work. Because when systems fail, it's not the PowerPoints they come crawling back to. It's the binders they mocked. The ones I don't let out of my sight. By the way, if you're the kind of person who actually values quiet power and smart revenge, you should probably hit subscribe. 97% of people who listen to stories like this never do. And honestly, it helps our little team keep turning corporate screw-ups into satisfying justice. So drop a like too if you want more endings where the clipboard wins. Back to it. So I knew Dana Carlisle was coming before most people. That's what happens when you build the onboarding documentation they forget they still rely on. I saw the request for badge access. I saw the new expense card approvals routed through finance. I saw the mandatory leadership syncs pop up in legal's calendar. She was coming in hot, and from a firm known for pushing zero paper compliance dashboards that look like candy-colored slot machines for executives too lazy to read version logs. The rumors? She's sharp. Came from Genaxis. Did a full ops digitization in 6 weeks. Another one. She's a shark, but a polished one. Prada shoes, Python scripts. I don't care about the shoes. I care that she came from a company that failed their SOC2 6 months after she left because their documentation couldn't survive a basic audit trace. But here, no one remembers that. They just remember the LinkedIn photos and buzzwords. Streamlined. Real-time compliance. Automated resilience. She entered our records office like it was a crime scene. I was midway through cross-checking supplier response times against deviation logs from Q3 when she appeared in the doorway, flanked by a consultant in a blazer 3 sizes too tight and an intern holding a tablet like it was a ceremonial staff. "You must be Ellen," she said, not asking. "This is, wow, a lot of paper." I stood up, wiped toner smudge off my palm. It's called traceable documentation. We've passed 6 ISO renewals on it. She gave a smile that didn't reach her eyes. That's adorable. But we're going to bring this place into the 21st century. The consultant chuckled. The intern looked scared. I just nodded. Let them think I was being polite. Let them underestimate me. Let them treat this room like a dinosaur graveyard. I'd buried bigger egos in these shelves than hers. And I had a gut feeling I'd be doing it again. Soon. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue when she started using words like redundant and obsolete and streamline. I just started printing double sets. One for their shiny new drive, one for my locked cabinet. I labeled each file with the new system's checksum and mine, side by side. I logged each deletion, each overwrite, each new automation they bragged about. I even wrote the timestamps by hand, just in case they decided to scrub the logs. I've seen systems go dark before. I've seen files vanish and servers restructure themselves in the middle of audits. You can't trust Shiny. Shiny doesn't bleed when the cert fails. I've got paper. I've got signatures. I've got the receipts they didn't even realize were still being made. And I have time. You learn patience in records. You don't win in the moment. You win in the audit. You can always tell who's never failed an audit by how cocky they are in front of an empty whiteboard. Dana Carlisle made her grand entrance at the quarterly leadership sync like she'd just descended from some TED Talk stage. White blazer, no notebook, perfect nails, and a voice you could slice salami with. She didn't sit when the meeting started. She paced, clicked the slide remote like it owed her money, told us we'd been held back by outdated methods and that she was here to streamline the old bones of finance and compliance. She even said it with this slight wince when she hit the word bones, like she could smell dust on my job title. Her third slide was titled, "The Future is Digital. Let's Get Rid of the Clutter." Guess what the visual was? A stock photo of a woman who looked suspiciously like me, drowning in file folders. Cute. I waited. I always do. Let them circle the wagons first. Dana started rattling off new initiatives: cloud redundancy syncs, automatic compliance dashboards, AI-based audit prep. The consultant next to her kept nodding like a bobblehead with caffeine withdrawal. When she got to my department, she called it an analog bottleneck, like I was the damn Hoover Dam standing between her and her metrics. Finally, I raised my hand. Not high, just enough for her to see it over her ego. I just want to flag that our paper logs aren't clutter. They're a verified trail. Every ISO renewal we've passed has required original revision histories, signed approvals, and deviation tracking. That doesn't always translate into an automated pipeline. She smiled the way someone smiles at a dog doing a trick it wasn't asked to do. It's 2025, Ellen. You don't need a clipboard to prove compliance. Trust me. And just like that, the air shifted. Some folks chuckled under their breath. Others stared at their phones. My director wouldn't meet my eyes. I nodded slowly and didn't speak again. She thought she shut me down. But what she actually did was wake me up. That night, I drove straight to my garage, pulled the emergency binder system I'd mothballed after the 2019 contract reform. I started printing. Everything. Every checklist, every approval doc, every version log from the past 8 years. I coded each page with a physical timestamp and embedded a unique ID using a cross-check cipher I created back in 2017. Didn't tell anyone, didn't log it on the network. I even scanned my handwritten notes and kept hard copies in triplicate. One for office, one off-site, and one in a lockbox that doesn't exist on any inventory list. I didn't do this out of spite. I did it because I've been through this dance before. Flashy new exec comes in, swings a machete at the red tape, and leaves behind a graveyard of undocumented shortcuts that no one wants to own. And when the cert fails, when the auditor starts asking about traceability and version integrity, they all turn to the person with the clipboard and say, "Can you fix this?" So yeah, I was humiliated. Mildly, but I was also alert, hyper-aware. I knew that somewhere down the line, Dana would make a move she couldn't walk back. And when she did, I needed to be ready, not just with receipts, but with irrefutable artifacts. Because she wasn't just mocking paper. She was mocking the very thing that kept this company from getting torn apart by auditors year after year. And that, right there, was my cue to stop smiling and start preparing for the day she'd come begging for the files she deleted. The email came through at 6:12 a.m. Subject line, "Action required, legacy docs transfer, 48/8 our deadline." No greeting, no context. Just a link to the new Document Harmony portal and a cheery PDF that said, "We're decluttering our compliance culture," in Comic Sans. I didn't flinch. I'd already backed up everything that mattered 3 nights prior. Hard copies, encrypted flash, notarized trails where needed. I even went through the trouble of scanning old sign-in logs from the supplier review board because I knew no one else would think to. They think compliance lives in spreadsheets. It doesn't. It lives in patterns, paper, pressure, pen ink from a VP who forgot he initialed a waiver 5 years ago during a vendor fiasco. And when the ISO auditor asks for context, guess who they look to? Not the dashboard. Me. Still, I did what was asked. Uploaded clean versions of every doc they requested, left out nothing. I wanted them to feel in control. It's easier to trap someone when they think they're holding the leash. The consultants came in the next day, 3 of them. Blazers, white sneakers, and startup energy that smelled like almond milk and startup failure. One of them, Bryce, walked into my space without knocking, looked at my shelf of validation logs and said, "You still use binders? That's so retro." I stared at him for a full beat and replied, "You still trust shared drives with 1 layer of authentication?" He laughed like I was joking. I wasn't. They started optimizing within the hour. By optimizing, I mean they blew through directories like sugar-high raccoons. Whole folders vanished. Files were renamed, restructured, moved to new containers with no change logs. Redundancies were cleaned up. Historical copies purged. And every time I asked where the backups were going, I got a shrug and a Google sheet with an archive tracker that made no mention of chain of custody. So I did what I've always done. I watched, I documented, I created my own ledger, by hand. Every deletion, every overwrite, every timestamp when Bryce or his buddies touched a file. If a revision was removed, I logged it. If a name was changed, I logged it. If someone deleted an approval tag, I printed the last cached version and wrote the exact minute it disappeared. Some of the files I flagged had signatures from executives no longer at the company, the kind of thing auditors love to chew on when they smell inconsistency. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't protest when Dana called the new system cleaner, faster, and audit-ready. I nodded and asked if she wanted me to shred the legacy protocols. She waved her hand. Those can go. They're obsolete. So I said, okay. Then I took the originals home. Every last page. I laminated the first page of the original vendor checklist, the one with the 5 deviation notes they missed in the new upload. I tucked it into the front of my emergency binder, just as a reminder. The next morning, I walked into our server room with a small, matte black USB key, plugged it into the only offline desktop left, the one used for thermal labeling in procurement. I opened a folder marked Q4 Archive Red, Rev 9, and watched the light flash as the backup transferred. Then I locked the key inside a fireproof box, sealed it, and placed it in a cabinet in facilities, tagged under Vendor HVAC Protocols, the only place no one would think to look. Off network. Untouched. I wasn't paranoid, I was deliberate. Dana thought she was erasing clutter. What she didn't know was that she was walking blindfolded through a minefield of her own making, and I was quietly recording every footstep. The conference room smelled like fear, masked by cologne and stale espresso pods. Final pre-audit briefing, all hands, suits from Risk, legal lurking in the back, a screen the size of a drive-in theater blazing the new streamlined compliance dashboard, complete with swirling blue animations that meant absolutely nothing. I took my usual seat, back right corner, 2 chairs from the printer nobody knew how to refill, flipping open my laptop and setting down a leather binder I didn't expect anyone to ask for. I'd been told to present. That's what the invite said. Legacy Audit Process Overview. Ellen Ruiz. I had my diagrams ready. Revision timelines, sign-offs by VP, by quarter, by product line. Clean, complete, documented to the bone. Then Dana strutted in like she was headlining a product launch, not preparing for an ISO audit that could make or break our $10 million certification renewal. She didn't even glance at me. "Morning, team," she chirped. "We're in a great place. We've done a lot of cleanup." Her clicker chirped and the screen shifted to a sparkling new folder structure labeled ISO 27001 Final Framework. I recognized none of it. Colors, yes. Structure, no. It was all front-end polish. No source tracking, no deviation logs, no legacy document trace. Dana gestured toward me. Ellen was going to run through the old process, but honestly, we've already cleaned this up. I blinked once. My cursor was hovering over the HDMI output. I hadn't even spoken yet. She turned to the crowd, mostly senior staff and 2 members from the auditor liaison team flown in for the prep. "Let's take a look at what used to pass for process control." She pulled up the master checklist file, the one that had been the backbone of every audit since 2017, and with a dramatic flourish highlighted it on the display. "This," she said with a laugh, "is what we're replacing. No offense, Ellen, but this thing is older than my grad school syllabus." A few people chuckled. Someone coughed into a sleeve. Then, right there on the big screen, she hit delete. A soft chime. The file disappeared. Dana tossed the remote on the table like she'd just executed a power move. Goodbye, paper legacy. Hello, real-time compliance. I said nothing. No one did. I plugged in my USB without a word, saved my open folder, and shut my laptop slowly. The sound of it closing felt louder than the chuckles had. I stood, picked up my binder, walked out, no eye contact, no raised voice, just the quiet click of the door behind me. It took 3 seconds after I left for the first person to realize what had just happened. I don't know who it was, maybe legal, maybe one of the audit liaisons, but someone in that room suddenly remembered that deleting original audit artifacts live during a pre-audit briefing in front of witnesses creates a traceable, time-stamped event. And someone else realized Donna had just erased the only ISO-approved master document in existence. On screen, on record, and laughed while doing it. But by then, I was already gone. I didn't need to see the fallout. They'd come find me soon enough. Audit day began with too much cologne and not enough certainty. Dana stood by the glass doors like she was greeting a diplomat, all smiles and teeth, holding a sleek black folder and two identical branded coffee mugs she probably had someone order 5 minutes before the auditor arrived. "David, so glad you could make it in person," she gushed, like they were old friends. They weren't. David Lane, lead auditor for the ISO renewal, walked in with a single leather satchel and an expression like he'd seen too many of these shows before. He shook her hand politely, didn't touch the coffee, and asked if we were still starting at 9. "Absolutely," Dana said. "You're gonna love what we've done. We've digitized the whole thing, clean, optimized, and all in one place. No more legacy clutter." The presentation began with exactly what you'd expect from someone who loves control panels more than content. A minimalist dashboard with drop-downs and glowing check marks, backed by a PDF titled ISO 27001 Streamlined Framework, Q4 Final. It looked impressive. Modern. Empty. David didn't react. He flipped open a lined notebook, paper, ironically, and started asking questions like he was just scratching the surface of a calm lake, knowing full well there were gators underneath. "Can we start with the original revision logs for protocols 6B through 9D?" he asked. Dana's smile twitched. "Of course. Everything's been consolidated into this new system." David glanced at the screen. "Consolidated how? These protocols had 10 prior deviations on record. Where are the documented resolutions?" Dana blinked. "They're summarized. We rolled them into the new framework to simplify versioning." David didn't nod. He didn't blink. He just clicked twice, checked a timestamp, and said, "This file was created 2 weeks ago. Your last approved audit cycle was in March. Where's the record of deviation number 7 from vendor loopback? It triggered a full C-level review last year." Silence. Someone from legal shifted in their seat. Dana cleared her throat. "That was part of the vendor remediation bundle. It's captured in the notes." "No, it's not," he interrupted, gently but firmly. "I just searched loopback, and there's no entry past April. Where's the corrective action approval? It requires dual sign-off." She stared at the screen like she could will it into producing a miracle. Her PDF just blinked back at her. He turned the page in his notebook. "Also missing are the signed logs from the production rollout delay in Q2, the exception waiver from security, and the revalidation on process step 14A. All were cited in your last audit response. Where are those?" Dana's mouth opened. No sound. Someone coughed. Someone else minimized Slack on their laptop. Fast. David leaned back. "I'm seeing clean metadata here. Too clean. No iterative log. No hash trail. These don't look like evolved documents. They look like recreations." She tried to recover. "We transitioned from a fragmented legacy system to a centralized framework. The gaps you're seeing are an artifact of the migration." He looked up, eyebrow raised. "You replaced 10 years of compliance documentation in under 8 weeks. That's what this tells me. Is that correct?" Well, yes, with optimization in mind." David closed the laptop in front of him with deliberate calm. "Then we have a problem," he said, "because what I need is not optimization, it's auditability. And right now I'm staring at a system with no trail, no version control, and no signatures." Dana finally looked down at her hands. Her voice dropped. I'll need to check with IT. Maybe some of the records didn't port over." "You deleted them," someone muttered under their breath. It wasn't loud, but it echoed anyway. No one laughed this time. Ellen Ruiz had not reappeared. No one had heard from her. But suddenly, everyone realized the one person who would have had all those logs, those revisions, those signatures, wasn't here, by design. David turned to the room again, softer this time. "If someone has access to the original documentation, I suggest you find them. Fast." And then he wrote one word in his notebook. No one could see it, but you could feel it settle over the room like a shroud. Flagged. And just like that, Dana's performance became a countdown. The spinning began the moment the door closed behind David. Donna pivoted like a malfunctioning Roomba, trying to land on any explanation that wouldn't sound like she'd just gift-wrapped a $10 million compliance failure and set it on fire with a grin. It's not that the records are gone, she insisted, waving her hands like she could manually reboot the credibility we just lost. They're just redistributed. The legacy system was too convoluted, spaghetti logic. Ellen's stuff was... She caught herself. It wasn't scalable. Convoluted? Someone repeated flatly. It was Rob, our senior compliance officer. He didn't look up from his notepad. Dana turned toward IT, where Liam, poor guy, looked like he wished he could crawl inside the Ethernet cable and disappear. Didn't we agree those archives were a mess? Weren't they duplicated across folders? Remember what I said about entropy? Liam cleared his throat. We said they were thorough. We never said disorganized. Legal, already looped into the call, unmuted with a hollow ping and said nothing. Just sat there, watching. David hadn't left the building. He was across the hall, pulling files on his own laptop with a slow, deliberate hand, like a man disassembling a bomb. You could feel the air go thinner every time he scrolled. Then it happened. Rob's phone buzzed. One glance. No words. He stood, walked to the hallway, typed something. When he came back, his entire demeanor had shifted, less clenched, more composed. At that exact moment, in a sunlit room 2 floors below, my calendar pinged with a new invite. Title, Review, Original Audit Artifacts. Host, R. Maxwell. Time, 8 a.m. Tomorrow, location, boardroom A, no message body, no attachments, just a meeting, just silence. I closed my book slowly and looked out the window over my tiny garden. The same air I'd felt tighten around Dana was now still, like the moment between thunder and the sound reaching your chest. I didn't reply right away. I didn't need to. They'd remembered. Somewhere in that building, probably after David asked a 5th time where the real deviation log went, someone had quietly said what no one wanted to admit. Ellen probably has it. Of course I did. I didn't keep those artifacts because I feared incompetence. I kept them because I anticipated arrogance, because someone always thinks their PowerPoint is stronger than a signed protocol with wet ink from a VP who's long since been laid off, and because I've never once watched a streamlined system survive its first forensic audit. I made myself chamomile tea and lit a stick of cedar incense, the kind I used after every successful certification cycle. Ritual, quiet celebration. But this time, I wasn't celebrating. I was preparing. At 5 p.m., I walked out to the garden shed and opened a container marked Winter Tools. Beneath the spades and gardening gloves was a sealed, fireproof pouch. Inside, the USB labeled Reverend 9 Archives, Auth, Sign Off. I held it in my palm for a moment, feeling its weight. Then I took out the folder. Thick, red-backed, tagged with the original sign-off sheet from 2017. It still had the faint scent of toner and lemon cleaner. I slid it into my leather bag. Not because I planned to bring it yet, but because I wanted to feel what it was like to carry it again. I stood in my kitchen as the sun dipped behind the neighbor's chimney and sipped my tea in absolute silence. No racing heart. No need for revenge. Just alignment. Purpose. I would show up tomorrow. And when I did, I would not ask permission. I would not argue. I would simply set the record back into the room and let the silence take care of the rest. The boardroom felt colder than usual. Too many suits in one place and not enough confidence to warm the air. I stepped inside without knocking, heels clicking sharp against polished concrete, the kind of entrance that doesn't ask for permission and doesn't need a second chance. They were all there. Dana seated at the far end, posture forced and jaw locked tight with that consultant Bryce beside her, trying to look invisible in a too skinny tie. Legal on the side. Risk, compliance. David Lane, the ISO auditor, stood calmly by the window, flipping through a worn notebook with the kind of calm you only get when you already know where this is headed. No one greeted me. No one spoke. They just watched as I crossed the room and placed the red folder on the center of the table like a closing argument. Then I reached into my bag, retrieved the USB, and set it gently on top of the folder, the label faced up. Reverend 9 Archives. Auth. Sign off. It didn't need decoration. The words said everything. Still, I didn't sit. I didn't open the binder. I didn't connect the drive. I just waited. David was the first to move. He approached the table, adjusted his glasses, and opened the folder with the careful precision of someone handling evidence. His fingers flipped through the printed logs, the deviation approvals, the dual signatures, the source code annotations, the validation stamps. None of it was new to him. He'd seen this level of documentation before, rarely, but he had seen it, the kind that stands up in court, not just in a conference room. He turned to Dana, calm, clinical. These are the originals. Why were these replaced? The question was a scalpel, not a sword. It didn't yell. It carved. Dana's mouth twitched open. The old system was fragmented. We opted for... David raised a hand, didn't raise his voice, didn't look angry, but it stopped her cold. He didn't ask her to finish. He just turned back to the documents and made a single check mark on the front page with a blue pen. Behind me, someone exhaled, loud, like they'd been holding it for days. I still hadn't said a word. Bryce started shifting in his seat. Rob from compliance looked down at his tablet and tapped something. Dana, for all her theatrics, looked suddenly very small under the weight of a red folder that might as well have been a lead brick on that table. David spoke again, quieter this time. The timestamp on these aligns with your official audit trail through Q3. These signatures are dated, sealed, and match the escalation logs you submitted in last year's review. These were never supposed to be replaced. They're irreplaceable. Dana tried again, but we streamlined the workflow. He cut her off gently. You destroyed the audit chain. Silence. Not one shuffle, not one cough. Even legal stayed muted, and that told me everything. I took a step back from the table and folded my hands in front of me. I wasn't angry. I wasn't smug. I was done. I had come here to restore what was broken, not by accident, but by ego. I hadn't needed a title to do it. I hadn't needed a promotion. All I needed was the truth, printed on 80-pound paper, annotated in blue ink, and never once touched by a half-baked AI dashboard that couldn't tell a deviation from a deletion. They could have asked me at any time. They didn't. And now the room belonged to me. I looked at no one, not even her. The power shift was done. Quiet. Surgical. Let them figure out what it meant. I'd already moved on to what came next. By noon, the word emergency was being whispered with all the breathless panic of a fire alarm that no one wanted to be the first to acknowledge. David didn't storm. He didn't raise his voice or slap the table. That would have almost made it easier. Instead, he calmly labeled the audit status as provisionally non-compliant pending internal accountability review. The kind of language that doesn't scream but obliterates, like velvet wrapped around a wrecking ball. Ellen's originals, my originals, were scanned, verified, and officially accepted as the only remaining valid audit trail. My sign-off logs, my deviation resolutions, my annotated workflows, all intact, all unduplicated, all precisely what the ISO framework demands. But that deletion, the one Dana performed with a smug grin and a swipe of a mouse, that was logged, documented, witnessed, and now officially flagged. It didn't matter how new the dashboard was or how sleek the fonts looked. It didn't matter how many consultants Dana waved in front of the camera to distract from the missing audit chain. Once an original artifact tied to a previous certification cycle is knowingly deleted during a scheduled pre-audit session, it triggers Clause 7.1.3 in the ISO escalation matrix. Intentional documentation breach, root cause review required. Legal didn't say much during the emergency meeting. They didn't have to. The silence was a verdict in itself. A short memo circulated 2 hours later with sterile phrasing. Effective, immediately, Dana Carlisle will be removed from the ISO compliance approval chain pending resolution. No press, no Slack announcement, just her name quietly ghosted out from the chain of signatories in the audit packet. Then came the ask. Rob from compliance approached with a quiet kind of urgency, voice low, posture cautious, like I might vanish if he stepped wrong. Ellen, he said, we need the full restoration structure, folder hierarchy, revision logs, the works. Can you help us rebuild it? I didn't say yes, not immediately. I closed the folder in front of me, stared at the matty finish, ran a thumb along the edge like it was a trigger. I'll do it, I said, but on one condition. His eyebrows lifted. I want custodianship, independent, separate from finance, IT, or legal. I want the authority to maintain this documentation, untouched, unfiltered, and unedited. I want direct reporting line to internal risk, and I want it in writing. He didn't hesitate. Done. Because he knew, and they all knew, that without me there was no path forward. The contract tied to this audit? $10 million, locked behind a clause that required certified renewal. No renewal? No contract. And if anyone even thought about trying to recreate the structure I built from scratch, they'd be spending the next 6 weeks chasing ghosts through empty folders and broken links. I watched the room shift again. I didn't raise my voice, didn't gloat, just nodded once and pulled out the laminated architecture map I'd kept in my bag, the one labeled Remediation Structure, Legacy Path Verified. I handed it to Rob. Start here. They scrambled. IT reactivated the legacy server partition. Procurement reopened the old file-based access control. Legal quietly redlined 4 new clauses into our compliance protocol, 3 of which were direct reflections of how Dana had failed. As the sun set behind the smoked glass of the boardroom windows, I walked the halls like a ghost everyone suddenly remembered mattered. The same people who laughed quietly during Dana's presentation now avoided eye contact, or whispered their thanks like prayers into the void. I didn't need gratitude, I needed distance, and a locked drawer with only my key in it. Control doesn't always come from power. Sometimes it comes from patience, from ink that doesn't fade, from protocols no one cared about until they were the only thing left standing between a company and a $10 million collapse. Tomorrow, I'd start the restoration. Tonight, I placed the original binder on my desk, and for the first time in 6 years, I labeled a new file, Custodian, Ellen Ruiz, Authority, Independent, Non-Negotiable. The final compliance call was held over secure video, but the silence had the weight of a courtroom. Even with all cameras on, no one moved. No one breathed too loud. It was the kind of hush that settles in just before a verdict is read. David Lane sat dead center on screen, the ISO logo behind him like a seal of judgment. His background was Spartan. 1 folder, 1 mug, no distractions. The man was calm, composed, and completely without mercy when it came to protocols. He clicked to the last slide without fanfare. Process approval trail deleted during briefing. White text, black background. Nothing more. No graphs, no bullet points, just the phrase that would haunt the meeting for months to come. He looked up, eyes moving from square to square across the screen. Then he said it. Who deleted the evidence for a $10 million certification? No one spoke. Legal was there, both internal and external, but they didn't unmute. Dana, framed awkwardly in her home office with her bookshelf of unread leadership books behind her, stared like her monitor might spontaneously combust and save her the humiliation. David didn't flinch. He didn't press the question again. He didn't need to. Everyone already knew. He turned to me. Ellen Ruiz, he said, voice steady, will you serve as the accountable custodian of record for this remediation cycle and all future ISO documentation trails? I nodded once. Not out of pride, out of clarity. I had already been doing the job. Now it was just official. David marked something in his notes, clicked again, and spoke without lifting his eyes. Certification status. Approved. Conditional on governance clause 14A5, no documentation deletions permitted without dual sign-off from the documentation governance lead, effective immediately. He closed his notebook. The call ended. That was it. No applause, no emails titled Great Save, no balloons, just an org chart update by EOD that showed my name above a new box no one had seen before. Documentation, Governance Lead, Legacy Authority. It was printed on a simple brass placard the facilities team installed outside my door. No ceremony, no speech. I walked past it that evening with a hot coffee in one hand and the red folder in the other. I didn't linger, didn't admire it. Just unlocked my cabinet, filed the originals back into their labeled section, and sat down. The lights buzzed overhead. Somewhere down the hall, someone was reheating soup too loudly in the break room microwave. I smiled once, faint and brief. Then I opened a new log sheet and got back to work.